Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jim Sinai. I'm a Senior Director with Salesforce on our platform marketing team. And I'm super excited to be here with our guest, Brian Kelly, who I'll introduce in just a minute, from Morgan Stanley. And today we're focusing on Morgan Stanley's three key apps to building HR apps. Sorry, three key steps or three key tips to success to building HR apps. Anyway, let's get into it. And in true Salesforce fashion, we're going to start with our safe harbor slide. Look, we are a publicly traded company, and it's important to know that you should make all your purchasing decisions based on products currently available. If you have any questions about this statement, you can find more information on our website. Now, at Salesforce, we're all about connecting and engaging with customers. And, everything that we've built over the last 15 years has been about transforming how our customers interact with their customers with the CRM technology. And part of that is taking advantage of this app revolution and these connected devices and really being able to deliver a new engaging experience to consumers and to customers. And this rise of the connected customer is predicated on cloud, social, mobile, and even taking advantage of things like new data. And it's transforming how we use technology in our personal lives. And so what does this have to do with this webinar today? Well, we're going to talk about employees and how employees use technology at your company, because one of the things that we're observing here at Salesforce is that employees want to have that same engaging experience they have in their personal lives as they do in their work lives. I mean, you come into work, you should not be stepping into a time machine, going back in time to use something like a fax machine to declare something like benefits. So how do you take that same technology that you give to your customers and give it to your employees? And how do you have all that same great magical experience? Now, at Salesforce, we say, what if you can basically take that CRM technology, instead of calling it customer relationship management, you call it employee relationship management. And that's what we're going to talk about today, which is how you use Salesforce for employee engagement and enablement, using tools like our Marketing Cloud, our Communities, our HR Help Desk, and really how do you take our new Analytics Cloud and stretch it across all your data silos and create analytics for the rest of us, or analytics on your mobile device. And so to have this conversation, what we thought we would do is we would bring in a customer and do just a real Q&A. And so today on the phone with us is Brian Kelly from Morgan Stanley. Brian is the Executive Director and the Global Head of Corporate Services Technology, HR Corporate Practice. He also runs the PATH Center of Excellence. Brian, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Jim. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us from New York City. This is truly a bi-coastal webinar. So, look, I used to live in New York. You live in New York. A lot of people in New York know Morgan Stanley, but for those who don't interact in the finance world, do you want to give us a quick summary of who Morgan Stanley is?
Yeah, certainly. Be glad to do that. So Morgan Stanley's been around for a while. Our firm was established in 1935. We cover three main business segments and offer products and services in those areas. Institutional securities. We do a lot of global wealth management, as well as asset management. Like Jim said, we're headquartered in Manhattan, right here in Midtown, right off the edge of Times Square. And to kind of just give you some size of our scale, we do business in 40-plus countries, so we're very global. We have over 1,300 locations. We have over 55,000 employees. And at the end of last year, we wound up being ranked as the #1 global in IPOs, #2 in global announced mergers and acquisitions. And at the end of last year, our net revenue stretched just over $34 billion. So at a very high macro level, that's who Morgan Stanley is and the areas and businesses that we cover.
Great. And so we're going to have a conversation today about these employees. And I just want to call out that this conversation is going to start with both you and I, but we want to include people on the phone. So if you're listening on the webinar, on the top left is a way for you to ask a question. You can go ahead, click it, type in your question, and at the end of the Q&A that Brian and I are going to have, we're going to see how many questions we can get. So hopefully you can find that Q&A panel on the top left. We also want your feedback at the end of this, so make sure you let us know how we're doing on this. So, Ryan, you mentioned 55,000 employees, right?
Correct.
Now, how many of those employees are you responsible for delivering technology to?
In the area of HR and corporate services, all 55,000.
And so you're really running, in some regards, a bigger technology shop than a lot of startups do, because a lot of startups don't even get up to 55,000 users, unfortunately. Tell me about the team that you put together to do that, and how you guys think about that.
Sure, Jim. So I have, across my remit, I run the corporate services technology organization, and also part of that, heading up the Platform as a Service Center of Excellence. I've been with Morgan Stanley for about 2.5 years. Before that, I spent the previous 10 years at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. My entire team across the globe is 36, or actually 60-plus technologists across 5 different countries. And I've got folks in teams that cover multiple disciplines, development teams, business analysts, project managers, all focused on delivering technologies for our clients. And in the specific area around Platform as a Service, in Salesforce, we have a team of 3 onshore resources and 6 offshore resources.
And we're going to talk about this Center of Excellence in just a little bit. So one of the things in getting ready for today, you and I were talking, and you kept saying, yeah, we work in IT, but we really work in the business. And I think that this is a mantra that I'm hearing a lot when I go out and I talk to people in HR and people in IT, and they really are saying, we're trying to live the lives of our end users and our business leaders, so that we can deliver solutions to them. And can you comment a little bit about how you think about actually getting out of your role and thinking about the business? Because before we get into your tips, I think it's helpful to understand the mindset you bring to your job.
Sure. So, Jim, as a firm, we have diverse business lines that we have to support. And if you think about all those business lines, we have thousands of technology suppliers helping us do that. We operate in a very challenging regulatory environment, and that's globally. We have a lot of high complex integrations, and like you said, we're here to enable the business. But from an employee engagement perspective, what we do in HR and corporate services is we want folks to be proud of the tools that we require them to use internally, and we don't want to hear them complain about the tools that they use. So we're very focused on our employee experience, and first and foremost, that, like you said, that enablement of the business, and we do that through innovation. We're very committed to understanding the leading edge and application development trends, but always being very mindful of how we manage risk. We also, in any investments that we make, especially in technology, we always have to back those up with a return on investment business case. We're focused on bringing things quickly to market, and obviously keeping that total cost of ownership for our technology under control, because we firmly believe that the more we reduce our operating costs, the more we can continue to invest in how we provide that enablement to the business.
Yeah, it's like this, I don't know where I heard it, but someone's talking about, the CIO's role is not the information officer, it's the chief innovation officer. And this shift to the cloud is really enabling people to focus on the business and not on the technology.
Yes, very true. We have to be very strategic partners with our clients. We've got to be able to understand their speak, their lexicon, speak their language, so we can show them and we can articulate what we've heard from them, and then take that understanding into the innovative arena and create technology solutions to support them.
Yeah. So let's get into it. I mean, we're gonna talk a little about these in detail in a minute. You've outlined sort of 3 keys to building and deploying successful apps. We call them engagement apps because, if they're not engaging to the end user, then if they're not intuitive, then they not only do they not use it, but then they complain about it. You talked about governance, security, and sponsorship, and we'll get into that in a sec. But before we do, I actually want to keep going and talk about how you're organized to deliver these 3 things. And one of the things that you talk about is this Center of Excellence. And people that work at larger companies understand Center of Excellence is, what what is a center of excellence for you guys?
So for us at Morgan Stanley, within this domain, the Center of Excellence is a grouping of assets, resources, human capital that really know what they're doing, are coming together to build this capability, and also establish more standards and repeatable processes around it. So our belief in building a center of excellence is that the more we work on projects, the more we do it, the better we're going to get over time, and the faster we're going to get at delivering solutions. So we established a center of excellence, and we're focused on developing 30 applications over the next 2 years. So those 30 applications that we're targeting, we're also counting on very strategic partnerships that we have with some outside parties as well. So we can see some of the logos represented there. So all of these things coming together, glued together, kind of build what we're labeling as Center of Excellence, and has many stakeholders that we try to represent in that diagram on the left, both not only our own team within the Center of Excellence, but also obviously with Salesforce, our legal department, other vendors that we use, executive sponsorship, information security, and compliance, just to name a few of those.
One of the things that strikes me when I think about like a successful center of excellence is, you talked about repeatability. And as you try and scale apps out to 55,000 people and you try and figure out how to get more velocity in your department so you can focus on the business more, things that, repeatability isn't just repeatability in technology. It's like, how do you roll out technology and do the right user trainings on it? And how do you, it's the whole kit and caboodle, really, of launching a piece of software, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're dealing with and what we're on the verge of doing, and hopefully becoming very good at, is we're in a new paradigm of software development as we see it. We know that being on the cloud and writing code and delivering software on the cloud is relatively new. And we're working very closely with our internal clients, the business, information security, to make sure that what we're doing is we're doing it the right way, and we're creating standards as we go. If we come across an area that we don't have a standard or haven't been through before, we stop, we pause, we reevaluate, we make sure we make the right step next forward with all the key stakeholders involved in those decision-making processes, and we move forward. There's really no there's not really a clear recipe right now on what we're doing. We're kind of defining as we go, but we feel like we're making great strides in creating these processes and these protocols that we can lift up again the next time around on the next app, if you will, knowing that there's a beaten path and that we've done it before.
So how big do you need to be to have a center of excellence? Can a 100-person company have one? Can you have a one-man center of excellence? I mean, or are there disciplines of a COE that any company can adopt?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole genesis of our talk today, you can probably plug and play this whole concept of center of excellence anywhere. I don't really see scale or size of organization to dictate whether you can or cannot have a center of excellence. I think anytime you're trying to build something new, you're really carving out the right resources you need and the right focus that you need to have on it, and it's the right level of commitment is the way I kind of like to look at it. You're identifying key talent, whether that be internal or external. You're carving them aside and you're giving them a clear direction and clear set of objectives to go reach as a team, and create it so you build that cadence moving forward and it starts to branch out into other areas of the organization. Great.
So I bet everyone's like, let's get to the tips. But before we get to the tips, one of the vendors that you picked from your center of excellence is Salesforce. And while we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the platform, there is a reason why you're building a lot of these apps on Salesforce. And they tie into some of the tips that we're going to talk about. They tie into the COE. Can you walk us through like how Salesforce fit into your strategy for delivering these engagement apps for employees?
Yeah, sure, Jim. So there was a lot of reasons why we chose Salesforce, so we kind of called them out here. We've we have a strategic partnership with Salesforce. So we have been in business. We have been doing things with Salesforce on the Sales Cloud and other products and services that Salesforce brings to the table. In the area of platform as a service, the availability of skills needed, they are out there in the marketplace. The certification program is strong. We personally, in our Center of Excellence, we actually have a 501 certified architect on our team, which is a very valuable and prestigious certification. So we're excited about that. And moving things to the cloud, it's one of the focuses at the firm is that we want to make sure that we're very conscious of costs. Removing TCO where we can and where it makes sense is definitely a goal. This kind of hybrid model between a build versus buy, a lot of times in our back office domains, we find ourselves, maybe trending a little bit more towards the buy versus the build. And the platform as a service and Force.com offering by Salesforce gives us that ability to kind of blend both, where, we're not really, we're actually owning and developing and building the application, but we're not actually completely buying it, and we're actually taking some ownership. So it's that nice hybrid cross between the build versus buy. And then also it's very attractive to, build an application and on a platform that you can take to a mobile platform when you're ready. And with Salesforce and Force.com, the applications that we're building on, the barriers to entry into that mobile domain are very low for us. So and it's a very good marketing tool when we're talking about clients and building their systems and enabling their processes that we can easily take them to the mobile platform when the firm and when the client is ready to do so.
Very cool. I think that, we'll thread some more Salesforce conversation into this. One of the apps that you've built on Salesforce is an app called My Elections, this is, you guys use a bunch of different software there. You guys use, I think you guys use Workday too, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so you use Workday, you use Salesforce, you use some of the apps that you list in your COE. But when you think about what you're trying to do in having this elections website, like what was the genesis of this, and how did you guys get to this awesome-looking application?
Sure. It's a good question. So, yeah, I definitely wanted to highlight this one specifically for the group. Is the My Elections application is something that we had before. It was one of the applications that we knew we needed to address some requirements, new requirements that the current platform didn't provide. And kind of the criteria that we use, which we may dive into a little bit later in the presentation, is this application really fit the bill. And it was a way for us to make sure that we when we went in and rewrote something, we had a platform that we could quickly not only address what was in the current application, but also add in the other components that the client and user base was asking for. And this application specifically, you can tell, for those of you familiar with Salesforce and Force.com, doesn't really look like your out-of-the-box Salesforce user interface. So we did a lot of work in the Visual Force arena. So what you are looking at is a Force.com page. We've customized it and worked with our clients on the usability, and we've also worked with our user experience experts, of which we have a team that helped us through that whole user experience. So this application specifically allows the firm, or the employees of the firm, to make certain elections when they get paid and receive a bonus, that they can take a portion of that and align it to their charitable giving areas of interest. So this gives the ability for the employee to say, okay, I would like to have maybe 5% or $100 or $1,000, based on what they receive to their, to the charity of their choice. And the real power behind this, which I don't think we have enough time to go into, is just really the administrative function behind this, because we can actually control and distribute different programs, if you will, around deferrals for different folks, because some folks might be eligible for different types of things. We might have different enrollment periods. There might be rules against whether we're trying to collect free-form text in the amount of dollar figure versus percentage. So we've got all that configurable in the system. And we're very excited about this offering, a lot of good feedback. And this is just one example of the kind of application that we're looking to move to the cloud and move to this platform.
You mentioned that back-end configurability. Is that something that any admin in the HR department can go in, they log into Salesforce and make their changes, and it just pops right through?
Well, the users we've had designated for admin access is driven at an application level. So, depending on the application and the need for the platform and the application that you're building, we actually control, which is actually these are business users controlling the content that you see on these slides. So you can create, custom descriptions and custom terms and conditions, obviously titles of the different programs. So we can actually control that through a system administrative function.
Yeah, so it's like it's kind of like a little lightweight CMS. We're going to take questions at the end, but there's a question that came through that's very topical from Mark about how long did this take to build, and compare it to like what you might have done if you were writing it from scratch on a full stack, or
Yeah, sure, Mark. That's a really good question. And just to step back for a brief moment, with every Force.com project that we do, we're always comparing up it against what we think we would have spent, and the time and duration of it would have taken if we were to do a typical Java or .NET type project, if you will. This project took approximately 3 to 3.5 months, maybe 4 months. We would have probably have it done a little bit sooner. I will admit, though, we've missed the mark from a usability perspective and brought some more talent to the table to help us through that user experience, and that drove some changes in the UI. But typically, this project specifically was around 3.5 to 4 months time frame from kind of like, design to actually something where we could start to show the business and have them get a real feel for the use of how the application would flow. And then we find ourselves in our own, which might differ from firm to firm, our own controls around deployment and productionalization, and we're a few weeks out from launching this into production.
I think the thing that's really interesting too is that, like, if you had wanted to build the back end yourself for the administrator, then you would also have to build that separately. And basically, because you're using the Force platform, every time you add a field, you get a microservice for that. You basically get an API for anything. So if you want to if you want to make any changes, if you want to change the metadata, it all drives through to this page without having to worry about too much going back to the coders too much.
That's right. Yep. And when changes are made on the admin side, they're instant on the site. So.
Yeah.
It's very, very powerful, very well received by the, by our users.
Great. So let's get into your 3 tips. Your tips are governance, security, and aligned to the business. And, governance sort of gets back to that COE conversation we're having, which is, when you think about doing app governance, and app governance means so many different things and so many different tools. Why is this such a strategic thing for your team?
Well, our program, like we talked about before, we're targeting 30 applications, and that doesn't happen overnight. So we're looking at a stretch of time, right, 24 or so months. The right governance model is critical for us, so we can keep all the key stakeholders on the same page as we move forward. Okay, having those set routines and sticking to them has been critical for us to kind of just get the word out on how we're doing. Like, if we stay within our center of excellence and our development teams, project managers, and people that are working day to day, we kind of get lost in the details. We're always coming back to our management routines, getting guidance, raising the awareness around risks and issues, and sometimes getting help for removal of those risks and issues that we're challenged with. We're constantly coming back, reporting how the projects are doing. Are we still on target to meet our return on investment? And, it's not a perfect world, right? Sometimes things take longer than we thought. So we're managing that, setting expectations so there's no surprises at the end. And really, in every one of our meetings, we really spend a little bit of time just revisiting the strategic direction and making sure not only the folks within the Center of Excellence, but all the stakeholders around the table are held accountable for what we need them to be accountable for so we're successful. So it gives us that cadence, that management routine, that coming together, that the ship is still heading in the right direction, and everybody knows where we're at and where we need help.
Great. So let's the second one. You guys are Morgan Stanley. Obviously, you don't stay in business for as long as you do without thinking about security. And we have a few slides here on security. The first one is kind of, part and parcel of governance, which is how are you using the Salesforce platform the features of the platform to give you security. And maybe you can walk us through this model here of expanding circles.
Sure, be glad to. So this first slide here just really kind of gives you the flavor of the different levels or the gauntlet of security that we have in the platform. So you have to have a username and a password. Okay, you've got to. You can pull that from your worker data, and everybody's got to have an active login if they're going to get into the platform. Just being able to access the URL. The next level is we can actually set IP address ranges. So we need to make sure that you're coming from a Morgan Stanley IP address, and there's a definite range of IP addresses that we know about. And if you're not in the middle in the range, you can't get access. And actually, the next slide will help describe that a little bit further. But each application has its own profile of users. So at the application level, you can control who has access to the application and who does not. And then you start to get into these concepts a little more fine-grained entitlements. So once you're inside the application, the different objects that make up the application, and when I say objects, for those not familiar with Salesforce1.com, objects is kind of similar to synonymous to a table. You can set the permission of what users get to have access to what data. Like, for example, if you have an employee object or building object or any kind of object that you have in there with information, you can set permission at that level. And then to get even further down, you can get to that field-level access, that only certain types of fields within an object are accessible to a certain type of profile or user that you want to set up. So this is just the different rings of security. So it's very extremely secure, even though it does leave our four walls. It's just how we've kind of configured the platform to work from a security perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the best, the least talked about, most important features of the platform is profiles, term sets, and user sharing. So part and parcel to security. Now, I think not every company and not every person dialed into this call has the same burdens of security, but it's on the top of everyone's mind. And Salesforce, out of the box, provides a ton of resources and basically a full team to make sure that your data is safe inside of Salesforce, and that that there's network security and application layer security. But sometimes customers need more, and Morgan Stanley is one of those customers. How did you guys think about getting an additional level of comfort beyond the trust that Salesforce delivers?
Sure. So we've part of one of our most critical components of the Center of Excellence is our engagement with our technology, information, and risk team. So we worked with them on really what does an architecture need to look like before Morgan Stanley even has a thought of doing putting data or doing development on the cloud. It's very, very important that we had a clear plan, clear strategy, and very, very strong controls around our data residing in the cloud. So stepping back from this, before we got started, we needed to make sure that we had a solid encryption strategy in place. And right now we're working with CipherCloud on that, where we're actually encrypting data as it moves in and out of our firewalls. The entire program, if you will, is we're still kind of considering this whole effort as kind of a pilot. So what we're doing is we're somewhat test driving these very strong providers of these technologies and these capabilities to make sure when we really lock in at the end of our 30 application journey that we have strategic direction with the right providers. And this is just an example of one of the things we were committed to right up front is the concept of encryption. So it's very important to understand, thinking back to the slide with the different rings of security, that IP address range is very important, because if you can kind of conceptualize, you can be at a Starbucks, if you will, on your laptop, enjoying your favorite drink on a Saturday morning. You can actually, if you know the URL, you can actually hit the Salesforce cloud and see the application. But if you don't come through that CipherCloud gateway and use the encryption keys to encrypt and decrypt the data, the information you're looking at is useless. It's gobbledygook. It doesn't make any sense. It's encrypted. So that IP address range, you can kind of think of that as the orange box here. If you're not within one of our IP addresses, i.e. going through the Cipher Cloud Gateway, the data is not going to be decrypted for you to read and understand. So this is a very important component in our architecture. We work extensively with Cipher Cloud to make sure that they're providing the best possible encryption algorithms for us. They're reinvesting back in their product, and we're also working with other vendors out there doing the same, as we move forward. But this picture, although it's very high level, it's very macro, it also tells a story. We think about being on the cloud and that being a risky, business to be in, but when we step back and look at this, if we're doing this right and we're encrypting data, it becomes a very safe place for us to conduct business out here because the data is encrypted, and we own the keys.
When you talk about restricting IP addresses, I immediately think, well, the first step is you got to have get your users to authenticate through a VPN, right? And so, to everyone on the call, I'd highly recommend, native to the Force.com platform, you restrict those IP addresses to your VPN range. So that's the first level of security. The other thing that a lot of people don't know about, and I'm not sure. It sounds like you guys have gone past this with Cipher Cloud, but sort of a good intermediate step is just simple two-factor authentication, which isn't about encrypting the data, but it's about encrypting the identity. And Salesforce has a authenticator app, and you can easily turn on either Salesforce or Google two-factor authentication right within Force.com. So just something to think about. There was one question earlier about secure and transparent mobile authentication. When you guys get to mobile devices, are you doing anything different, or are you thinking about it, or is it because you're using Cipher Cloud, mobile's covered?
We are not there yet. We're tightly coupled with our risk and control groups around not only just what we're doing on Salesforce and mobile, but what we're doing mobile as a firm. So we're in the process of still but finalizing what our strategy is for mobile. We have our own BYOD program. We have corporate issue devices. That's all still being finalized, and we're working with our information and security and risk teams to make sure that the controls around those, you can probably imagine, are completely watertight. And we'll be definitely ready to go when that day comes. We're just not quite there yet from a mobile perspective for this specific offering.
Got it. Cool. So let's get on to the third and final tip of the day, and this is the one as I think is probably maybe the most important. You could put this as 1 and 3 or 0 and 3. You got to get the right sponsorship from the business, and so talk us through about how when you have an idea, how do you think about what executive sponsorship means?
Absolutely. So the top of the house has to know what you're doing, right? And they have to believe in it and be very supportive of it. So the first question is, are we going to get a return on this investment? Like, we're doing things differently, and telling the story to why we're doing things differently is very important. So we need to be able to prove and actually, illustrate how this is better, faster, and cheaper than what we currently have in the current way that we've been currently doing things. So it's very important for us to build out that model and be very clear, and then actually track moving forward how we're on track with that return on investment. Quick prototyping is very powerful. If you kind of think to the more of the agile type approach to software development, getting out of the business of making sure you have, a well-articulated business requirements document, taking that back to a development team, having them build against that, and then showing it to the client later, we, almost always are not perfect, right? Quick prototyping gives us the ability to sit with our clients, hear what they want to see, and then knock it out for them really quick, and we can turn that around. Now, albeit maybe not 100% of the functionality, but at least the screen flow, the button clicks, the experience that they're expecting to see, they see a lot quicker than in our typical software development paradigm. So it's very, very powerful to be able to show them what we just heard or what we just talked about from an app perspective, through the prototyping approach. And then the most important thing is, we've got thousands and thousands of apps, right? So it's, getting the executive sponsorship around which apps we're going to line up, if you will, for this for this platform has to be very well thought out and very much supported. Before we start to do one bit of work, against that application. So in these three areas, having executives and that executive sponsorship, know that you're going to get an investment, know that the clients are going to be able to see things quickly, and then they understand and support the applications that we have on our radar is very, very important.
Cool. And you actually, you go so far that when you think about talking to the business, you actually speak their language. And I'm just going to move over here to the next slide. When you think about taking in looking at your app portfolio and managing it versus app intake, you actually use the language of the business, buy, sell, hold, which nobody out in San Francisco really uses except for the people that work for Morgan Stanley out here. So walk us through what buy, sell, hold means in the world of IT and HR apps.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So like Jim said, we like to think like the business. We like to use their language. It makes things better to understand and put it into perspective, especially when you're thinking about portfolios as large as we have. So we consider an application as a buy, as an application that's very strategic, right? We're going to continue to invest in it. It's critical to the operation, the business process that it supports. It's a keeper. It's here to stay. If we're going to sell an application, we are in the process of eliminating it. Whether we don't need it anymore, we're not in that business, or whatever the hundreds of reasons are where we were not going to use an application anymore, we consider it an elimination. Also within the sell domain is the process of replacing. So for whatever reason, whether an application's become, maybe running too long on a certain type of technology that's no longer supported by the vendor, or whatever the reason might be, we might want to reinvest and sell the application and replace it with something new. And then we have an application classification called hold. This is where we're simply going to just we're totally okay with what the application is doing. It's kind of ain't broke, don't fix it type approach. But even in that case, if we do have an opportunity to take a look at even a hold application where we can prove that we have some level of investment that has a higher ROI than the investment, we would consider that as a candidate for what we're doing on the platform. So it gives you some kind of perspective of how, when we think about our application portfolio, how we like to break it down and classify it, and it works well for us. So that's kind of what the buy, hold, sell model looks like for us.
Great. I think that, it's funny, one of the, in my journeys in talking to people like you around the country, one of the things that I'm hearing really around the world is that people actually are building, IT departments are using Force.com to build apps to track the app intake process. It's a really simple use case, really simple app. You just declare the fields and the different pick lists, and that way you can easily run reports on your own version of buy, sell, and hold.
Interesting.
So there's a bunch of questions I think that we're going to get to, because I think that's the fun part of this conversation. And one of the recurring questions that I've seen is, what are some of the next apps you're planning on building on Salesforce in the next few years?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Right now our app intake process is, I don't think there's any shortage of targeted applications, but kind of through the the criteria of what we're looking to put on the platform, we're quickly able to eliminate those that come in. We're staying within kind of the back office type technology. So we're looking at applications that do touch the employee. We are doing different applications across corporate services. We're launching an application that we're using for, just to give you an example, tracking property going from one building to the next. If I'm got reassigned a new desk, I might need to take my monitor over to the next building. We have an application on Force that is going to enable us to track that from an auditing and compliance perspective, to make sure there's permission to make that move of that asset moving from one building to the next. So our focus is in the HR, corporate services type application, and there's really no shortage of opportunities, we feel. We really are making sure we make good decisions on those applications and opportunities that really make a lot of sense. We're not including applications that require that sub-second response time or any kind of real-time computational intensive or ultra-low latency requirements. We really know what kind of candidates that we're after, and we can pull those from our application inventory and, going back to the previous slide, kind of funnel them through and see what comes out once we have that client buy-in. So that's kind of our approach moving forward.
Now, are you using Salesforce to do quick prototyping of apps, and is that different than how you might do, do prototyping on other technologies? I mean, one of the things that I hear a lot, and I think this is an emerging trend, is how do you give the business sandboxes and let them show you what they want and at least start down that journey so that in a non-production environment you can do that rapid prototyping. Are you doing any of that?
Yes, we are. So we'll typically have maybe one or two meetings with a potential client or customer of our center of excellence, and we will actually take a stab at what we think we heard, and very quickly, sometimes in a day or two, a 48-hour turnaround, show them kind of like a quick and dirty, if you will, of what we thought we heard. But from an app perspective, we're not creating a Word document, repeating like meeting minutes almost. We're actually looking at our notes from the meeting, what we heard. We go away and actually build something that works, just so we can get the workflow down and the whole exchange of data, what the application is calling for and giving back, just from a usability perspective, to make sure we're on track.
Are you guys thinking about doing anything around ATS, application tracking systems, with Salesforce, or?
We haven't stretched into that domain.
Yeah.
At this
point. That's one of the areas that both people are building themselves, but there's a bunch of great apps on AppExchange that for listeners on the webinar, you should check out Talent Objects by Lumas and Job Science, and there's probably 5 or 6 great apps there if you just go to the Human Resources section on AppExchange. No point in building something if there's something that works for you right out of the box. All right, we're going to take 2 more questions here. The first one is, how are you using Force.com to ease the front-end user interface of systems of records? Are you really thinking that Force.com can help be that layer of engagement that you weave across all your different systems of records so that users don't have to go to individual apps, or what are you thinking?
Well, we definitely had our challenges in the beginning as we started to roll out applications, trying to use as much. See, the focus in the beginning was speed. Okay, how fast can we do this? And we learned a lesson very quick that sacrificing a little more time around the usability and experience of the user paid a lot of dividends towards the end of the project. So to answer that question specifically, that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to build those interfaces, those skins, if you will, that the user will use to access the data in Force, which actually integrates with our system of records in the background, so they have a good experience. We've made a commitment to making sure we have close engagement, even making sure we have budget allocated for the teams that focus and are very good with the user experience. We bring them on board in the project very early, so we can make sure that what we're building is something that's going to be palatable and very usable to those that are asking for it versus finding out later. So that's a really good question, and I think it's critical that don't sacrifice that usability for the reward of speed. So sometimes you got to strike the right balance, and learned our lesson a little bit in the beginning, but I think we're really hitting a stride on making sure we got commitment around that usability.
And the sort of the final question on that usability, like, are you using any UX out-of-the-box tools, or do you just have a UX team, or how do you guys attack usability?
We're very fortunate to have an extremely talented organization that's very good at understanding not only the app and the button should be in this position, in this color, but to really just folks that are experts on human factors. Like they really understand, adoption rates and abandonment rates of using an application, and they can kind of help us design the screen flow and experience of what we're after gathering, what we're after from a data perspective and gathering, and what we're targeting for the output of the user to see. We've got a really strong team that's outstanding at doing that, and they help us a lot in the design phase. By the time we're actually ready to move to QA and those UAT phases, there's no question about the flow of the application and how it works.
Great. So we do want to wrap up the webinar. I think there's a ton more questions out there than we're going to have time to answer. Morgan Stanley has been a long-time customer of Salesforce, started with using us for CRM, and now they're doing all sorts of incredible things, including this custom app dev for their shared services team. So, Brian, I'm gonna on behalf of everyone at Salesforce, I want to say thank you, and I'm sure that everybody is chomping to get in touch with you. Are you open to sharing how to get in touch, or should they just track you down on LinkedIn? Or
Yeah, that works. That's completely fine. I'm out there on LinkedIn. I'm Brian.R, as in Richard.Kelly at morganstanley.com. I think it's healthy to share experiences across not only our industry but others, because we all get stronger that way. So yeah, absolutely open to connecting.
Great. And a big thank you to everyone on the webinar that stayed and engaged and asked these really important questions, and a big thank you to the Salesforce team to help put this together. So on behalf of Salesforce, that wraps up our webinar for today. 3 success tips for deploying HR apps with Brian Kelly from Morgan Stanley. Thank you so much, and have a great day.